Steeler fans, it is time for the Monday morning conversation. I have a return guest as well, the same as last week. We had a lot of people who come back. I love to talk to people again. This time it's Zachary of Around the 412, and you've also heard him on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with Alan Saunders, both on the Fans First Sports Network. Smitty, what's up?
My man, what's going on? Appreciate you having me back. I've been on here a couple times. You said you've been on Afternoon Drive. We got to make that happen again this off season too. But yeah, appreciate you having me back on.
No problem. And I love talking with other fans. You know, you're kind of glued in. You've got your sources. We'll talk about that here in a second. But I want to get the fans' perspective because I've had beat writers on, and Alan's been generous enough to come on my show multiple times. And, you know, sometimes you ask them questions, and it's different when you get an answer from a fellow fan compared to someone that covers the team. Because when you cover the team, you're not really a fan. You're just doing your job. And even if you did have roots that have you feeling a certain way about the team, you just kind of got to push those aside. So let me ask you this question to start off. What's your take on the state of this team after another playoff loss, losing 5 in a row? Just in general, I feel like this is really, in the last decade, like this is the lowest of the low for the fan base. I don't know if you'd agree or disagree.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, so I don't know if I individually necessarily share that sentiment, but that's certainly how it feels as a whole within the fan base. Like I was just telling Alan this past week, actually, on the podcast. Like I really feel like I know that fans can be fickle, and there's certainly things that are going to happen this offseason that will get them to rise up again and probably experience the highs along with the lowest of lows. But it generally, I get the sense that it really doesn't even matter what happens this offseason, or I'll go as far as saying like even next regular season. Like until this team gets the monkey off their back by winning a playoff game, I really feel like there's nothing that this team can do right in a lot of fans' eyes. And that's just like the sense that I get.
Some might even say as long as Mike Tomlin's the head coach, that there's nothing they can do right. Because there's people that that's a hill they're willing to die on, and that's fine. That's their prerogative. Do you think, though, there's hope for this team heading into this offseason? Because the change, everyone's talking about change. Like, they want to see change. We thought we might see drastic change in the coaching staff. No. They thought we might see, now it's going to be roster development, if you want to call it that. Is there hope in that realm for you moving into the offseason?
Well, let's pump. Gerald Alexander coming back isn't enough change for the fan base. No, I think he's a really good coach, to be honest with you. I'm excited about him coming back into the fold. We can talk about that in a little bit, but I think the faith that you would have to have is in just oversee. Like it's going to be a long-term plan. Like unless they randomly hit on a quarterback, which you never know when that's going to happen. And when I say that, I don't mean like I mean like a needle-moving quarterback, not just like a run-of-the-mill average starting quarterback play. Until they hit on that guy, it's going to have to depend on them building a roster more so mirroring the top teams in the NFC as opposed to the AFC. Because you look at the tops of those two conferences, and they're very different in terms of the way that those rosters are constructed. Look at Philly, where they can, and I'm not trying to take away from Jalen Hurts. He's not a Mahomes, Allen, Lamar Jackson, Burrow type. Same thing with like Jared Goff. Like you look at the top teams in the NFC, they're built very differently. And I think that seems to be kind of the path that the Steelers are going with Omar Khan and Andy Weidel. I think that was why Andy Weidel was brought in to kind of mirror what Philly is trying to do. Now, will that work out? I don't know. But in terms of addressing the trenches first and foremost, I think ideally they would like to think that the players are there on the offensive side of the trenches. It's more so just about continuity for them at this point. Time will tell if that's the case. And they can turn the page and look at the defensive side of the trenches now and start to build the roster in a similar fashion as Philly. The question that I have, though, Jeff, is like, I know that it's 0 for 1, so it's not like a large body of work. But do we trust them to pick the right guy, evaluate him, and then develop him when it comes to the quarterback position the next time that arises? Like 0 for 1 in terms of Kenny Pickett. I know it's not a large body of work, but like that's a big question to me that's going to determine how all this goes anyway.
I was going to ask you, do you trust the team to build that roster even if they get an average quarterback? So I think we would both agree that Justin Fields would be labeled as not elite, but an average to potentially above average due to his athleticism. So you would have to build an Eagles-esque roster around a Jalen Hurts type quarterback. And I think there's a lot of similarities between Fields and Hurts, by the way. But do you trust the Steelers front office in their development process, their evaluation process to build a roster like that around an average quarterback?
I trust them bringing in the right players, like the evaluation at top through the draft and free agency. But what I'm not sure that I trust is going, a step down from that, the coaching. And I'm not just talking about Tomlin within that, because I know the people hear coaching, that's immediately where they want to point their
Right.
finger to. The coordinator hires, which again have not inspired a lot of confidence within them. And I just don't think there's enough people on the staff as well. Like, I know that that's been a big conversation. That's why, like, going back to this whole, Gerald Alexander coming back into the mix, I hope that it's not at the expense of Grady Brown. Like, I would like to see them give him a bigger role and just expand the staff. I think they need to bring in a defensive assistant to help out TA that has, more experience working with the front seven. Like, the fact that Brian Flores walked out the door wasn't, to me, as big of an issue as the fact they didn't replace that position when he did walk out the door. And I think they need to do something along the same lines offensively, because we're talking about like a franchise quarterback or whoever the next guy is going to be. Who in the world do they have on the staff right now that you can say, this is the guy that I'm trusting to develop that guy? Like, Tom Arth is the quarterback's coach. He worked with Justin Herbert for 2 years, which is like what people want to point to as like the reason that they feel like it was a good, like, I had people in my mentions about this, a good, but it was like his third and fourth seasons in the NFL. Like, I'm not saying that he was done developing at that point, but it was like, he wasn't the first guy that he worked with. Pep Hamilton was in place there. Now that's a guy, to me, that actually has a track record of developing quarterbacks. When you look at the work that he did with Andrew Luck and Justin Herbert, like between Tom Arth, Mike Sullivan, Artie Smith, Tomlin, who in the world in this organization has developed a quarterback before?
I mean, let's be honest. Who has developed a competent offense in the NFL before? I mean, Arthur Smith did in Tennessee.
Yeah,
I'll give him
yeah.
credit. He had a couple good years with
Mhm.
the resurgence of Ryan Tannehill. He had a good offensive line. AJ Brown. These are household names, mind you. Like, we're talking about Derrick Henry and AJ Brown. Like, those are freaks.
Yeah.
They are guys that transcend an offense. And so everyone's like, well, the Steelers don't need a true number one. Are you kidding me? Yes, you do. And whether George Pickens is that guy is neither here nor there. But let's back up a little bit. You
Yep.
brought up the coaching staff and the quantity of coaches. Quality
Mhm.
is something we could talk about another time, because that's a long discussion. When Art
Mhm.
Rooney II did his media circus availability through every single outlet in the city of Pittsburgh in the 412 area code, he said that he doesn't think adding coaches matters. He basically said, I don't think that's going to move the needle, essentially. What
Yeah.
was your takeaway from Art Two's overarching thoughts about the team after the season ended the way it did?
Um, so for me, I'm always somebody that is more the actions of them are going to speak more than the words. Like, for him to say
Yeah.
one thing is one thing, and for them to do something is another. But if that is truly the sentiment, then, to me, that raises some red flags, because I couldn't disagree more with the fact that I think the more eyes that they can get, I understand that there's the possibility of having too many cooks in the kitchen, too many hands in the pile. But like, in terms of what we're talking about here, where there's several things that this just coaching staff doesn't have that they could benefit from adding more people to. Like, right now, you have too many guys, in my opinion, that they're asking to fill too many roles, as opposed to having like one guy that's just really good at one thing and bringing that to the table. Chuck Smith, they have as a a pass rush specialist with the Ravens. That's literally all he does. He's Cam Hayward's personal coach, or was his personal coach. Also worked with Alex Highsmith. The Ravens brought him in literally just to work on guys with pass rush moves.
Yeah.
He's a coach there now, literally just to do that. Like, they have specific coaches for specific roles, and the Steelers don't do that. And I think that that's where they're losing out. And that's why I talk about the quantity more so than the quality for me. And the same thing goes on the offensive side. Like, and defensive side, I think they need a senior assistant on both sides. Offensively, I'd like to see a guy brought in that's developed a quarterback. Defensively, TA, I think you could get away with him being the defensive coordinator, and really, obviously Mike Tomlin has a large say in what goes on the defense side of the ball. But with both of them, their background is in, the secondary. That's where you're talking about. So like, I think you got to bring in somebody like an Antonio Pierce, I think would be great. I'll just throw that name out there just because he's worked with the front seven, and Brian Flores obviously working with the front seven. Somebody that can like dial it up and give you different looks in terms of the pressures and blitzes that they throw. So yeah, for me, it's always been more so about the quantity of the coaching staff than the quality.
I think with Art's comments, the one thing I hated was it felt like he was answering questions. And I know this dude's getting blitzed from all angles with these different reporters at different outlets and stuff, not to mention the media circus, which is when he sits down with those beat writers. But he almost put off this vibe that what am I supposed to do? Like, that's kind of the vibe that I got. Like, well, you're the
Mm,
freaking owner of the team. So
yeah.
instead of saying, I don't think it moves the needle, why don't you say, we're going to evaluate everything? And if we think that adding coaches is going to be a difference maker, then damn it, we're going to do it. I would want to hear that. It just felt like he seemed helpless in some of these situations. Like, you're not a fan. Like, I'm helpless. You're helpless. We have no say in this. We just follow the team. You're signing the checks, and it's a billion-dollar organization.
Well, that's true too. It's because it almost comes off like he knows the answer to it. Now he's disagreeing in terms of what we think. He's saying they don't think that the
Right.
size of the staff matters. So he's giving you a pretty definitive answer in terms of how he feels. But at the same time, okay, if that's not the case, then what is the
Yeah.
reason? Like I don't know. So that's a good point for sure.
So, okay, so the change. Yeah, as you talked
Mhm.
about Gerald Alexander, who is reportedly, I don't know if by the time this runs, maybe it's official, maybe not. I don't know that he's added to the coaching staff, and it's a small coaching staff, like you mentioned. But
Yeah.
other change that we're expecting is probably not going to come until the new league year starts in March, and that is with free agency. The Steelers could have, with a couple cuts here or there, have it well over $60 million in available cap space. Do you think they're going to approach free agency different than what we're used to seeing, which is typically we're going to wait till that first wave kind of dies down. We're going to get our second tier first wave guys, and then we'll go into the second and third waves of free agency before the draft and try and fill some more needs. Do you think this is going to be different? Maybe that's the change we're expecting.
I honestly like time will tell, but I'm expecting them to be spenders, like big spenders in free agency. And I think they get aggressive early on, just from everything that I've heard. Like when you look at the wide receiver position and the way that was handled last year, I think they realized that was a huge whiff from
Yeah.
them. I mean, not the trading Deontay Johnson, that aspect of it was fine, but everything that happened afterwards, like not replacing that until the trade deadline, and then the replacement being sending a 5th-round pick straight up for Mike Williams, clearly that didn't go well. Just the process as a whole. They miscalculated the wide receiver room. Not to say that they didn't try to, obviously the Ayuk thing took up most of the summer. They tried to turn every stone possible, but I think that they learned their lesson there, and I expect them to be big players in free agency at the top of that position. And I think there's some interest in top corners too. A name that was thrown my way from a scout on the team that I know they're in love with is Asante Samuel Jr. It's almost like I think they're kind of looking at it. We know that they like those veteran players. Like he's played 4 years in the NFL already, yet he's still just 25. Like we know that that's a
Right.
big checkbox for them. So he checks a box there certainly. And also what I know that they really like about him too, plays inside and outside, hasn't played a ton inside in the NFL. I think he only has like 80 some snaps or something like that in the slot. But if you go back to his time in college, played there a bit too. So he could play on the outside with Joey and just 2 wide receiver sets, but then he can kick inside. And if they like Corey Trice enough to give him that job on the boundary and 3 wide receiver sets, so be it. Or they could obviously double dip at the position in the draft. But obviously, like the T Higgins is going to be the talk in free agency. Should he hit it? Should he get out of Cincinnati? The name that I've heard there is Chris Godwin. I know that they really like him. Should he hit the market? But I know a lot of people just feel like he's similarly to Mike Evans, just a Tampa Bay Buccaneer for life. So we'll see if that happens. But I think they're going to spend some money in free agency for sure. And they have to. Like, I mean, you look at the offensive side of the ball specifically, I think they're going to allocate a lot of resources in free agency to that side.
But the Asante Samuel Jr., you're forgetting the biggest factor in the fact that his father played in the league. So therefore, Mike Tomlin wants him on the team no matter what.
Absolutely.
He just didn't play for
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
Steelers. If he played for the
Mhm.
Steelers, he would have been drafted, no doubt about it.
And that's why Azariah Thomas, the cornerback out of Florida State, is also going to be so much on their radar because his position coach there is Pat Surtain, who obviously they would have an affinity with. So
We joke about this stuff, but it comes to fruition more than
yeah,
it doesn't. So it's like
yeah.
it's a running joke, but it's also factual. Let's talk about the biggest free agent position, and that's going to be quarterback. What do you see the Steelers doing there?
Justin Fields, I think, comes back on a multi-year deal. I think anybody that's kind of around the team or not, just from like an outside perspective, just being a fan, I think that you can see that the writing is on the wall at this point. And I would have said that prior to the reporting this week regarding
Yeah.
Russell Wilson. That's kind of how I felt. I think it's going to be a multi-year deal. Art said that, they want somebody in place in 2026, but I'm looking at that as like, okay, Justin's the guy in 2025 and they have somebody under contract for 2026, but that is the first year where I would expect maybe they do take a swing if they're going to at the next guy, whether that is in the draft or, if somebody's made available free a trade, whatever it might be. But yeah, I expect Justin to be the guy in 25. Don't know if you want to dive into the reporting of the Russell Wilson stuff at all, but yeah, Justin's going to be back.
Well, do you think, before we get into that reporting, do you
Mhm.
think that Justin gets signed before free agency, or do you think it's going to
Mm.
take a bidding war?
No, I think he'll get signed before free. I think there's motivation from both sides to get it done. Like I think knowing that the writing is on the wall for Russ makes it a lot easier for Justin to commit here. I think if there was a case where he was unsure of the Steelers' direction and he was like, maybe I'm gonna have to come back and once again compete for a spot as opposed to just like kind of being etched in stone as the starter, there could maybe be a desire to go out and see what the market has to say about him. But I think they'll get something done prior.
Yeah, it's going to have, and anyone that would thought that Russell Wilson was going to be a viable option for the Steelers, and there were a lot of people that were.
Mhm.
Why would Justin Fields want to come back to that? Like, he should
Yeah.
be fresh and healthy as hell. I mean, yeah, he suffered the abdominal injury towards the end of the season, but he played 6 games really and sparingly after that. He should be ready to go, and he wants a starting job, and I think he proved that. Let's talk a little bit about those reports. I've got my own opinions on said report. There were multiple reports and multiple facets when you talk about Jerry Dulac's Pittsburgh Post-Gazette article. Then you talk about a DD Kinkwabala going on 93.7 The Fan. Then you have Jay Glazer on Radio Row at the Super Bowl talking about it. I think I saw a couple other people chiming in. The sentiment is that Russ is out. Is that what
Mhm.
you're hearing? And what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, that's absolutely how I believe this is going to go. I had a conversation with Alan about it, obviously, but also with my boy Derek Bell, and he made a good point. Like, I think it's interesting to be able to take a step back, and when there's something like that arises, a report like that arises, especially this time of year, you look at it and say, who has the most to gain from
Yes.
something like this leaking? And if the writing is on the wall for Russ that he's not going to be back in Pittsburgh, if he knows that Justin is their preferred option, why not get his team to kind of push this narrative that now it's like, okay, look at how well Russ was playing, but then what changed? Something that had to have changed. Well, hey, it wasn't something on Russ's side. It wasn't Russ that was playing poorly. It was something, a change within the offense that they wanted him to do differently. So I absolutely 100% believe that this is Russ pushing this narrative on his way out the door. That's where I'm at with it. And honestly, it doesn't even some of that makes no sense to me that Jerry put out there. Jerry's plugged in. I'm not trying to doubt anything that he says or anything like that. But the part that really got me was talking about his inability to audible and make checks at the line of scrimmage and stuff, because it's like, even in real time, you can see it, but especially if you're somebody that goes back and watches the tape on these games, right up until the last game of the season, the playoff loss in Baltimore, Russ is making checks at the line of scrimmage and audibling. Like, he had that freedom to do so. So that's absolutely garbage that was put in there. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it. I think that it's a case of Russ knowing that he's on his way out the door. And with this, maybe there's a little bit of a way that other teams will look at it and be like, oh, he was playing well. And if there was something about the offense that changed that made his play all of a sudden go downhill, maybe we can look at the body of work from when he was inserted into the lineup in that Jets game up until the game where they scored 44 points against the Bengals. And that's the sample we should really be looking at.
Once I read Jerry's article, I was furious. What the hell's going on with this organization? Then I took a step back and I talked about this on my Friday podcast, which is, like you said, is the report slanted? Who's it slanted towards? And why would it be written that way? The more I thought about it, I thought to myself, I can't believe Jerry Dulac wrote this report. I mean, unless there's some financial kickback happening behind the scenes, Jerry Dulac, I mean, you have other very pronounced, well-renowned writers in Pittsburgh that are going completely against the grain with what he's saying this is false. I was stunned because, like you said, Jerry is plugged in. And for him to say that to write that article was very, very fascinating. And
I
I think
know that he's heard from some people on
I
the
bet.
coaching staff in regards to it. Yeah.
I bet. And then you go back and Brian Batko, also the Post Gazette, he got the quotes from Arthur Smith back in October, and I read those. And he talks about it. This dude loved Justin Fields. Arthur Smith loved Justin Fields. You can tell it by the way he talked. When Mike Tomlin went Lone Ranger, rogue, whatever you want to call it, and went to Russ, it didn't seem like he was on board with the decision, at least at the time. So my question for you is, do you think Arthur Smith, let's assume your plan is what they do. They sign Justin Fields. He's the quarterback, at least in 2025. Arthur Smith has an entire offseason. He's worked with Justin Fields. He knows his limitations, his strengths and weaknesses. Do you trust Arthur Smith to build an offense that is capable with him at the quarterback, giving him a whole offseason to prepare?
Yes, to at least like an average degree. Also taking into consideration they're going to add some weapons
Right.
within that mix as well. Like they're not going to run it back with the same offense in place, just with Justin. I guess the question that I have more so than just like building an offense around him, and I would assume that this is going to be the case because you're committing to him as being the starter. But even in those 6 games last year, the one thing that I gave Justin a lot of credit for, even despite his very obvious limitations as a passer, was he wasn't turning the football over. I mean, just
Right.
one turnover within those games when he was a turnover machine, if you will, in Chicago. But the other thing within that was kind of handled him with kid gloves. Like I thought it was very apparent that they were giving him a backup quarterback plan and saying, just don't lose this. Now, is that just a product of just the way that they've handled the offensive side of the football in general as of late, being super conservative? Or is that because they knew that he wasn't going to be their starter once their starter was healthy? So like that's kind of where I'm at with it. I'm cool with them running it back with Justin for at least 1 year and seeing what you got in him. I like you had said kind of at the top, I don't necessarily expect that he's going to be the answer to the long-term question that we have at the position here, but I don't think that he drastically goes in the wrong direction from where we were this year. Like I think they could be right back in the same spot.
Yeah, I agree. I want to ask you a question so when Ben Roethlisberger retired and they draft
Mhm.
Kenny Pickett, I said that this is a rebuild. They are starting from scratch. They got to build this thing up. And I said it was going to be 2 to 3 years. But then when you
Mhm.
redo the entire quarterback room last offseason, I'm struggling to say where this team is right now because I don't necessarily think it's a rebuild. You don't have you look at the defensive side of the football, there are some holes, but they do have a pretty good defensive roster. They should be much better than what they showed in the last 5 weeks.
Yeah.
Offensively, there are some holes, but if you add some weapons, they should be better. What would you call this? What is this for the Steelers right now?
Yeah, it's tough because it seems like they're never going to be a team that's in the wrong enough direction to just be able to fully commit. They have to kind of retool on the fly,
Right.
if you will, because they're still maintaining solid enough results where they're never going to be picking that high to land like that blue chip player without, a massive trade up. So I mean that's an interesting point that I haven't really given much thought, to be honest with you, like where I would say that they are in this thing. Again, if you hit on the franchise quarterback, that massively changes where you are anyway. Like if they suddenly well, it sounds like they want him to stay until 2027. If you take their word for it, with the Mannings, Arch isn't going to come out until then. But like, say Arch Manning comes out in 2026, they make some massive trade up, get him, and he is the Prince of Promise here, and all of a sudden he is the next franchise guy. I mean, that drastically changes where you're at in your
Right.
rebuild if you do land that guy on a rookie contract. But if it's taking the rest of the roster being propped up in order to just drop a quarterback in position where it is more like one of those NFC teams, then yeah, I'd say we're probably still a couple years off of that and having to hit on the drafts in a way that hopefully they did in the first 2 under Omar and Andy. So it's really tough to
It's
say.
tough.
I would say, yeah, we're really not going to know whether it's for the quarterback or just the rest of the roster being in such a good place. I would say we're really not going to get that answer until 27, probably.
Yeah. Because like you said at the very top, like if you don't have an elite quarterback, you have to have an elite roster. And I don't think
Yeah.
the Steelers have an elite roster yet. But you know what's going to happen? If they sign Justin Fields, he'll be the quarterback. They're going to be 9, 10, 11 wins if they get lucky and the ball bounces their way a couple times. And we're going to have the same discussion, but maybe, just maybe, they could actually win a playoff game. I don't know. That's where the bar is set
Well,
now.
that's why I say, like, they're going to continue to be within there. It's just a matter of when do they pull the trigger on the trade up? I
Yeah.
mean, to hope to land the frame, because you look at the way that the Bills got Josh Allen, the way that the Chiefs got Patrick Mahomes. It's not like those teams were terrible. Like they made trades up to get that guy, and that's honestly the path that I see the Steelers having to do, as opposed to the Joe Burrow in Cincinnati route where he was just at number 1, and they were bad prior to him
Yeah.
getting there.
I want to ask you about trades because I feel like sometimes Art Rooney has to sign off on everything that's done. I think Omar
Mhm.
Khan and Andy Weidel are aggressive. They want to be aggressive. They want to get their guy. And if you don't want to be here, you can leave. We saw that last offseason. I think that in a way, sometimes Art Rooney, he's kind of shell shocked from things that didn't go their way. Whether it was the trade up for Devin Bush, that did not pan out. And so I'm sure he's probably a little bit, okay, I don't know if I want to go down that road. But then when they traded the first round pick for Minkah Fitzpatrick, while he hasn't played well the last 2 years, it did pan out. The dude was an all-pro. He's been a very stable part of the secondary. And yes, I understand recency bias aside, he's been a good player. I'm curious if they could talk him into making some moves, because if someone calls me for Minkah Fitzpatrick, I'm going to listen. If someone calls me for George Pickens, I'm going to listen too. What do you think in terms of trades could potentially happen? Or do you think this is going to be a very standard offseason? Although last offseason was not standard by any measure either.
I would actually be more surprised if George Pickens isn't traded this offseason, because I think that this is going to, either way, is going to lead to a trade. I think the least likely thing is that they give him money this summer in an extension. Like that to me is not happening. So the question is, can they convince him to play out this year basically as like their own rental? And if they go down that path where he's not getting an extension, does he force his way out? Like, does he want out? Which I think is very likely. The other side of it would be, do they try to get ahead of this and trade him and hopefully get an extra draft pick for the 2025 draft and not want to go into the summer not knowing what's going to happen? And then even if you do trade him, you don't have that capital to work with until 26. So like either way, either path, I think it leads to George Pickens not being on the roster this year. I don't know between those two, which I think is more likely.
Yeah. I just can't imagine it. I can't imagine a situation, because you know that his agent's not dumb. He's going to say, look, man, don't practice. Don't do anything. And look at what T. Higgins did last year when they franchise tagged him, and the Steelers. We'll see what they do in terms of flexing their muscle. Do you think any other players could be viable trade options, though?
That's really the only one that's come to mind for me. I mean, I agree. Like, for as much as I love Minkah, I don't think that I'd answer the phone for sure. Yeah. I don't know that I would be making calls myself, but like, I'd be curious as to what another team would value him as. He has a very, in my opinion, tradable contract for somebody to take on. Outside of that, I don't really see, unless there's a name that like isn't coming to mind right now. That's like an outside one.
Yeah. I mean, some people are saying TJ Watt because he's on the last year of his deal, but I think they're going to lock him
Yeah, but
up.
like that's fan, like, we saw the Cleveland going down this path now with Myles Garrett. And I think that's just a lot of people saying, like, how different is Pittsburgh from Cleveland in terms of where they're at right now? Like, whether you look at it as a 3-win team like Cleveland or a 10-win team that's ceiling is getting into the playoffs like the Steelers, what's really the difference? TJ 1 year left on his deal. Could the picks that you would get back from him kickstart a rebuild? Maybe you land the franchise quarterback that way. Like, but that's all, fantasy booking in offseason, in my opinion, like, to bring my wrestling mind into this. Yeah, it's not going to happen. Like, if fans want to talk about it, sure, the team's not going that direction. I agree. I think he signs an extension. I'm more so curious. I would think from a Steelers perspective, they would want to get ahead of a Micah Parsons and potentially, whether it's with Cleveland or somebody else, Myles Garrett extension. But from his perspective, does he want to wait those two out and be the last one to sign out of those three to see what they come in at?
It's going to be fascinating stuff to watch. I do have to ask you a question, because I know you're a Pittsburgh fan. You're not just a Steelers fan. It's a difficult question. And you look at the state of the three professional teams in Pittsburgh, and it's not great. I'm going to be honest. It's not great. It's which team will be the next team to be in a championship game? And I'm not talking about a pennant race. I'm talking about, so that would be like a Pirates World Series, a Penguins Stanley Cup final, or the Super Bowl. Where are you putting your money on which Pittsburgh franchise is the next one there?
See, the question that I thought you were going to ask, and we literally just talked about this on Around the 412, is which one was a playoff game or series first? But that would have been a lot easier, because like, it's only one game in the NFL. My pick would still be the Steelers. Even though they've had this drought for a while, they would still be my pick. Get to a championship. I don't necessarily think they're close. I think they're still probably 3-4 years away if everything goes right. I'm going to go the Penguins.
Okay. I mean, they have so many draft picks. They're going to have to really
That's
move
that's the thing.
Yeah.
I was I was skeptical on the direction that they were going the very first offseason of Kyle Dubas when he gives Tristan Jarry the contract he did and also brought in Ryan Graves. But I think pretty much every button that he's pressed since I've been able to get on board with, even ones that I was skeptical of, like the Jake Gensel move. I mean, I think the return has been good already, and we haven't even really seen, those prospects get into the mix yet. So
I was behind the Pedersen and O'Connor trade too. I mean,
absolutely,
he's just
getting a
stacking
first round
up
pick.
picks. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say this, and it's the team that makes me want to throw my computer and microphone against the wall. The team that we should be answering this question with is the team that should be doing more in the offseason. It's a freak crime with the staff that they're building in terms of the arms. It's the Pirates. The Pirates should be the answer to this question because they have these at least a generational player in Paul Skeens. You've got good arms at Jared Jones, Mitch Keller. You're building up a good rotation, and they're doing nothing, man. It is so frustrating as a Pirates fan.
I think if you look, like, they have the arms built exactly for what the Major League Baseball postseason is.
Yep.
When you look at it, doesn't even start out as 7, it gradually builds to 7. So like they should be able to advance on the arms that they have with an average offense to at least set up a matchup between them and the $500 billion Dodgers in the NLCS. But you're right. Like the big move of the offseason is bringing Andrew McCutchen back, which I'm never going to complain about. I think Kutch should absolutely finish his career here. But from what that player should bring to the team value-wise, that should not be the most meaningful move that they've made. They've literally added zero. Like, I just saw this. In terms of the players that have gone and the players that have exited, there's a difference of 0 WAR that's been brought into the organization this offseason.
Yeah, because I saw Joe Connor and the Tommy Pham signing were like, they just negated each other. And Adam Frazier, like bringing Pony back. Like, I love Adam Frazier, but he's just a utility guy. Like, he doesn't do anything. I don't know. I was on board when they were like, bring back Starling Marte. I was like, what are we doing? Bringing back all the whole Zoltan team? Like, is that what we're trying to do?
Get Polanco back from Korea. Yeah, the KBO.
Oh gosh, it's not fun. But anyways, I want to give you an opportunity to plug Around the 412, the podcast that covers all three of those teams that we just mentioned, as well as your work with the Steelers Afternoon Drive and any other social media things you want to talk about.
Yeah, so well, you can find me, Zachary Smith PGH, on all social media platforms. And then I do Around the 412. Those come out separately. We record them all at the same time, but they come out separately throughout the week, talking Penguins, Steelers, Pirates, different episode each day that they come out. And then Steelers Afternoon Drive, Monday through Friday, right around 6 p.m. With my guy, Alan Saunders. You can find all that on their respective YouTube channels, either Steelers Now or Around the 412, and then wherever you get your podcast from, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from, you'll find them there as well.
Yeah. Thank you for your time, man. Enjoy the offseason. We'll be in touch.
Yeah, you too, man. Thanks.